Chapter 7. The Dawn of a Bright New Morning. Hezekiah came to the throne, determined to do all in his power to save Judah from the fate that was overtaking the northern kingdom. Assyria had besieged Samaria for 3 years, then carried thousands into captivity. The same thing could happen to Judah if God didn't work mightily on their behalf. His first project was to restore the temple services which had been shut down for the last few years of Ahaz's reign. First, he called for a loyal group of priests and Levites to return to Jerusalem from their homes throughout Judah. Then he convinced them of his plans. The priests began work at once, cleaning and sanctifying the temple. They sent word to many others to come and help. Because of the years of desecration and neglect, it was a difficult job that required many skilled artisans and craftsmen. The gates and doors were opened and repaired. Thorough cleaning took place. The furniture that Ahaz had removed was located and moved back into the original locations. The temple vessels had to be located and polished, and many of them were made anew because Ahaz had sent many to King Tiglath-Pileser. Idols had been worshipped in the sacred space, therefore special ceremonies were conducted to cleanse the temple of unholy influences. Meanwhile, Isaiah's house was bursting at the seams. Athaliah and Emmanuel had settled into the family's routines. The 3 little boys had a wonderful time together. Athaliah was exceptionally polite and helpful. Anya especially was proud of her for not acting like a princess while she was being cared for in a busy household. Ruel knew about Athaliah since he had waited for her with Isaiah on the street corner, and Isaiah told Ruel what he had learned after his long conversation with Athaliah. The 2 men felt that under the circumstances, the immorality of what she had done should not be held against her. Her whole life had been lived in an environment of immorality. Both men began doing their best to make cautious inquiries about Jared's family. The work being done on the temple was completed within less than a month. Everything was ready for the reestablishment of the sanctuary services. In the first service held, the king and the rulers of the city, together with the priests and Levites, began the worship service by making many sacrifices and seeking forgiveness for the sins of the nation. Then, for the first time in years, the temple courts resounded with words of praise and adoration. The music of King David and Asaph, his music director, was sung with great joy. Trumpets and cymbals and harps and lyres accompanied the singing. When the wonderful day of worship was over, the next item on King Hezekiah's agenda was to hold a Passover. He sent out word to all Israel and Judah, as well as letters to Ephraim and Manasseh. In the past, all 12 tribes had traveled 3 times each year to Jerusalem to worship together. King Hezekiah determined to do his best to see that take place again. Because the temple and the priests weren't prepared yet, they decided to celebrate Passover a month later than usual. The king and all the assembly were working together on this. They sent the announcement from Dan to Beersheba, the traditional northern and southern points of the previously united kingdom. Couriers carried the message everywhere: come to Jerusalem and celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. The last king of Israel was hemmed in Samaria because Assyria was besieging that capital city. So it was easy for the couriers to travel throughout the land. Many over the next few years and beyond would be taken captive. But at that time, many people still remained there in the smaller towns and on their farms. The confirmed idol worshippers in Israel mostly scorned and ridiculed the courier's news. A few people from the tribes of Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and journeyed to Jerusalem. Ultimately, some also came from the tribes of Ephraim and Issachar. A very large crowd of people assembled in Jerusalem to celebrate the feast of unleavened bread. Before the services began, the whole crowd went through the streets of Jerusalem, utterly destroying the altars and images that Ahaz had set up. They threw all the debris into the Kidron Valley. When they came to the temples of Baal and Moloch, they found them abandoned. Word had spread about what was happening. Knowing the stories from the past, the priests and priestesses disappeared. There was no one left to interfere with the task of uniting the city in the worship of God. Many priests and Levites were just then coming back into Jerusalem from their small tracts of land. They had all been forced to leave when the temple closed. Now they rushed to purify themselves and resume the responsibilities they had had before. They quickly relearned their roles in the ceremonies. Many of the visitors from the north had not properly purified themselves. They were not ritually clean. When this came to the attention of the authorities, King Hezekiah prayed for them, and they were able to participate in the service with God's blessing. In Isaiah's house, there was great joy that God had remembered his people and that restoration of the temple had taken place so quickly. Everyone but Athaliah was looking forward to the Passover. She was afraid to leave the house for fear someone would recognize her. Consequently, she stayed home with the 3 little boys and Naomi. Ruth was old enough to join with the adults in the celebration. Isaiah and Yishka made it known to everyone they could trust that they were looking for Jerusha, the widow of Eliel. Only Ruel knew why they were searching for her. With the huge crowds in Jerusalem, there was a good chance she would be there, but finding her might take a miracle. For 7 days, the Passover was celebrated with great rejoicing. Every day there was sacrificing and teaching and singing, accompanied by the Lord's instruments of praise. At the close of the week, the whole congregation wanted to continue the joyful celebration for another 7 days to learn more fully the way of the Lord. There had not been a Passover like this since the days of King Solomon. One day during the Passover, Athaliah heard some commotion in the garden. Cautiously, she peeked out to see what was going on. An older lady, very thin and tired-looking, was crying. The 3 boys were trying to cheer her up. Athaliah hurried out to join the group. Seeing her, the lady struggled to control her tears. "May I ask why you are crying?" questioned Athaliah. "Someone named Yishka told me to come here and meet those who live here," she said through her tears. "And why does that make you sad?" "Because years ago I had a little boy who looked just like this," she said, pointing to Emmanuel. Light began to dawn for Athaliah. "Is your name Jerusha?" Controlling her tears, she said, "Yes, it is. How would you know?" "Because Jared told me his mother's name was Jerusha." "Who are you and how do you know Jared?" "Let me tell you first that this young boy is named Emmanuel, and he is the son of Jared." Jerusha began to cry again. "My son has a son? I have a grandchild? How can it be? Who is the mother?" "It is a long story. Come inside where we can talk. But first, let me introduce you. Boys, this is Emmanuel's grandmother." "Isn't my grandmother also Emmanuel's grandmother?" asked Shir Jashub. "No, she is Emmanuel's auntie. But we are still all one family, right?" "Absolutely, we are all one family." Athaliah had never felt so much a part of this family until she said it. With the saying, she realized that this was the most important family she had ever been a part of. Leaving the boys to their play, the 2 women went into the house to visit. Athaliah asked Jerusha when she had last heard from Jared. Her answer made it clear that she did not know what had happened to him. Athaliah sighed heavily and wondered where to start. Finally, she said, "I am Emmanuel's mother. My name is Athaliah." Jerusha winced at that name, but she hugged Athaliah and said, bless you, my daughter-in-law." It was still hard to know where to go in the conversation from there. Hesitantly, Athaliah started at the beginning when she first met Jared and truthfully continued through all the twists and turns of the story. Jerusha gasped and cried again when she heard how Jared had died. Athaliah cried with her. Later, she related how Yishka the prophetess had received the message which saved her son from death. She told how Ruth came to deliver the message and get Emmanuel out of the temple, then how she escaped to this house. She finished with telling how the king's stroke had saved her and Emmanuel from being hunted and killed. Then Athaliah said, "Ever since then, we have been trying to find you so you could know about Jared and meet your grandson." Jerusha was hardly without tears through the whole story. Then she said, "Now that we have found each other, can we find a way to stay together? I know that you and Isaiah the prophet are members of the royal family, but I am not." Being royal does not matter. Isaiah's father was not royal, and his wife is not royal. I have not been associated with the royal family since I was 10 years old. But now that my father Ahaz is gone, I think my brother, King Hezekiah, will welcome us again. You don't want to stay in this house? I can only imagine living in the house of Isaiah the prophet. We are only here because it was the safest place for us to come. By now, I love this family in this house, but we are making them very crowded. We have been waiting to find you before deciding where I should go with Emmanuel. If you will have me, I want to be with you. Where do you live? Unfortunately, since I lost contact with Jared, I have had to live on charity from other people. Now I am in a tiny little place, far too small for the three of us. In that case, I am going to visit King Hezekiah. He will not refuse to help his sister and her family. I will ask Isaiah to go with me tonight. Now that my father is dead and the temples are abandoned, I am feeling somewhat safer. Of course, many of the great God worshippers will want to stone me for having a baby out of wedlock. Jerusha said, "Didn't you feel married to Jared?" Actually, I did. He was the only man I ever cared about or touched. Well, there you are, said Jerusha with a satisfied smile. Who is there to say you were not married to him? Nobody, I guess, now that everyone has left the temples, but somebody could show up later. There is a Jewish tradition that if a man says a child is his, nobody is to question it. I think it is my right to speak for my son. I, as your mother-in-law, will definitely say you were married, and Emmanuel is my grandson. With a laugh, Athaliah hugged Jerusha. Later that night, Isaiah accompanied Athaliah to speak with her brother. They had not met in years, but each of them had suffered through life with their father, and they were unspeakably happy to see each other again. They rejoiced in the fact that both of them had survived to meet again. King Hezekiah knew just the apartment that would be perfect for 3 people. They could move in any time. Hesitantly, the king made one request. With the Passover proceeding so well, and with the new determination in the kingdom to worship only the God of heaven, would it be possible for Athaliah to change her name? He realized she was not to blame for having it, but now that things were different, she would get along better with a different name. Athaliah had actually been thinking that herself, and it didn't take long for her to suggest an alternative. Emmanuel and I are safe because of Yishka the prophetess. Would it be presumptuous of me to take the name of another prophetess, Deborah? Hezekiah immediately replied, I think it is a very appropriate name for you. After all, your child is a sign from God and a reminder to all of us that he is with us. Then she confessed to him that she had not believed in any God or the great God since she went to the temple. But now that she had seen God work wonders to name Emmanuel, then save them, and then bring Jerusha into their lives, she could not possibly disbelieve in God. She was looking forward to becoming better acquainted with him. It was difficult to remove Emmanuel from his playmates. But with promises of lots of play dates both here and inside the palace, the family of 3 was comfortably settled in just a few days. With a scarf pulled well over her head, Deborah attended the last couple of days of the Passover with Jerusha and received the final blessing the priest bestowed on those who had attended. It was evident that God had wrought marvelously for the conversion of backsliding Judah and in stemming the tide of idolatry which had threatened to sweep everything before it. When the final ceremonies closed, those returning home took an active part in an important work which remained to be done. Throughout Judah and Benjamin and in Ephraim and Manasseh, they smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Asherah poles. They cut down the groves and destroyed the high places and altars. After they had destroyed all of them, those of both the north and south parted from each other, and the Israelites returned to their own towns and to their own property. The third item on King Hezekiah's agenda was to reorganize all the priests and Levites into groups with specific duties. For years they had lived without an income from the tithe. Now the king announced to the people living in Jerusalem that they should begin again to give the portion due the priests and Levites so they could devote themselves to the law of the Lord. As soon as the directive went out, the Israelites generously gave the first fruits of their grain, new wine, oil, and honey, and all that the fields produced. They brought a great amount, a tithe of everything. The men of Israel and Judah who lived in the other towns of Judah also brought a tithe of their herds and flocks, and a tithe of the holy things dedicated to the Lord their God, and they stacked them in groups. They began doing this the month after the Passover and didn't finish bringing the tithe until 4 months later. They had waited for years to again have the opportunity to return what belonged to the Lord. When King Hezekiah and his officials, including Isaiah, came and saw the heaps, they praised God and blessed his people, Israel. The king asked the priests and Levites about the piles of gifts and learned that they were just the leftovers after everyone had received as much as they could use. So Hezekiah gave orders to prepare storehouses in the temple of the Lord, and this was done. Then the various contributions could be stored with duly appointed men to take care of them. They also set up a system whereby all the males from 3 years old and up, whose names were in the genealogical records of the priests and Levites, would receive regular allotments. All priests and Levites from 20 years old and up were paid according to their responsibilities. All the priests who were descended from Aaron and lived outside Jerusalem were designated by name to distribute portions to every male among them, to all who were recorded in the genealogies of the Levites. It was seen that King Hezekiah was determined to undo all the damage his father had done. Because he trusted in God, he was very successful. Throughout his reign, a series of remarkable providences revealed to the surrounding nations that the God of Israel was with his people. One aftermath of the Passover was the influx of refugees from Israel. Having been there for the Passover and having experienced life in a city committed to righteousness, those who were loyal to God wanted to escape from the idolatry of the Israelites and from the Assyrians who were continuing to raid and take people captive. King Hezekiah welcomed them and helped them find places where they could fit into Judah's society. Tabitha, the little girl captive, found a loving husband among these new citizens. The prophecy about her was fulfilled, and throughout her life, she thanked God for all he had done to restore her soul. During Ahaz's final years and King Hezekiah's early years, God sent several messages through the prophet Isaiah that all centered around the sign of Emmanuel, God with us. Beginning in chapter 7, God gave the sign to Ahaz, even though he did not want it. In chapter 8, Isaiah warns that Assyria would definitely attack Judah, as few were faithful to God, and so many were worshiping idols. And yet, God would be with them. No matter how many rejected him, those who feared God should not follow the way of the apostates. They should only consult God and wait on him for salvation. Chapter 9 looked to the future, when the long-awaited Messiah, the true Emmanuel, would come. God himself would rule over an everlasting kingdom with justice and righteousness. Those who do not welcome him will end up destroying themselves. In chapter 10, disaster will come for those who only care about themselves and ignore the rights of the poor and widows and orphans. In the days to come, they will have even less than the people whose needs they ignored. God will punish the Assyrians for thinking it is their own wisdom that allows them to conquer the world. They think their gods are better than all the other gods of the countries they have defeated. They think that since the gods of so many countries have not been able to withstand their armies, the God of Israel will be no different. The king of Assyria said, "I've done all this. It has been by my wisdom and understanding. I can take more countries as easily as I could take eggs out of an abandoned nest, without anyone flapping a wing or opening its mouth to chirp." God likens Assyria to an axe, a saw, a rod, and a club. All of them can be deadly weapons, but they have to be used by someone with a strong arm. God has been the one who had permitted Assyria to gain so much strength. However, Assyria had arrogantly claimed more than can be attributed to just human ability. God allowed them to wage war in order to wake up godless nations, but their brutality and violence had gone beyond anything God could allow, because he is always on the side of victims. Now he foretells that Assyria will be punished and reduced in size until a child could count the number of the remaining soldiers. Those who were loyal to God should not be afraid of the Assyrians. God will deal with them, as he did the Midianites and the Egyptians. To God's people, that warning brought to mind familiar stories about God's care in the past. Chapter 12 is a glorious song of praise to the God who is with us. This hymn of praise brings to a close what has been called the Emmanuel volume of Isaiah's prophecies.